Hey, just a heads up. This video is going to delve into topics about some really messed up stuff. If you're not comfortable with a discussion about any of these topics, then this video may not be for you. Well, this is new. When I made that video, I wasn't expecting it to do as well as it did. 200 views is a hell of a lot for someone like me who averages like 6 to 8 viewers a video. I'm very thankful to those who decide to give it a watch and plan for great things in the future. That being said, this will be my last Andy and Leyley video until the third chapter of the game comes out. I refuse to be the incest game defender, and anyone who calls me that will be sold to a demon for some shitty knickknack. Good? Good. But first, a quick recap. Let's see if I can get this in under 30 seconds. Ready? Go! 10 years before the events of the game, Andy and Leyley decide to stuff a classmate into a box in a warehouse. Andy feels bad but ends up choosing Leyley over the world. This becomes very important later. 3 months before the events of the game, our titular duo finds themselves quarantined in their apartment with their parents leaving them for dead. Game starts and the siblings are starving to death when they hear their neighbors summon a demon. The demon kills them, leaving the pair with a fresh meat to chow down on. Yum. This ends up being a bad thing when the warden leaves and comes trying to confirm his death, where Andrew cleaves him in self-defense. The two fight some, meet a nice lady, summon a demon, kill a nice lady, choke each other out for a bit non-consensually, then break for lunch as in the person they used to know. Caught up? Good. Because it will be on the test. Let's get started with Chapter 2, Graves. We find our protagonist eating at a cafe, planning what to do next. It's been a while since the events of the first chapter, and thankfully, nothing of the apartment murders has shown up on the news. But while the murders seem to be buried in the past, one thing still lurks. You're not gonna be in the news, Andy. Oh shit. Ashley addresses Andrew as Andy, and he gives this look of deep loathing in return. Despite the fact that he wanted to leave the names behind, Ashley continues to cling to the past. This becomes very important later, but for now, let's put a pin in that. The siblings' squabble is cut short when the news report mentions how their apartment was burned down in a fire. But they were just there a week ago, and things seem to be perfectly fine except for the murders, right? Unfortunately, this seems to be one of those setups that the future chapters might carry out on, but I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the whole thing here. As a matter of fact, maybe I should bring up all the things that don't really go anywhere here at the beginning, since most of it happens here anyways. The first, as mentioned, is the whole corporate cover-up I was vaguely mentioning earlier. We get to hearing the news about how a fire burned the place down, reporting killing everyone in the apartment, including the Graves siblings. And a little bit into the chapter, the hitman sent after them seems to be contracted by a higher authority. We don't know who this company is yet or why they're after us, but the game still has 2 chapters left to explain, so there's no rush. The second thing I wanted to mention is when Andrew follows some cultists into an underground demon summoning party, and while it's played up for comedy, it does set up the idea of this cult spreading far beyond that weirdo in the neighboring apartment. And yes, you did see it right. We get to play as Andrew this time around. While the first chapter exclusively kept us in the role of Ashley, Chapter 2 splits up the gameplay between the 2 siblings. There's this neat little screen where the color for one of them will fade as the color is brought in for the one you're switching into. That being said, you'll only be switching when the game wants you to for story reasons. It's not like you'll be able to switch between the 2 freely, although it's still pretty neat. We get to have a better look into Andrew's head this time around, and that's definitely a plus, since Andrew was the character I felt for the most in the first chapter. But back to the game. Andrew and Ashley are waiting to ambush that hitman I mentioned earlier that Ashley was able to find out about thanks to that trinket the demon gave her. She comes up with a plan to outsmart the hitman, eventually leading him to a park where she gives Andrew the gun she took from the second warden in the first chapter. And it's here where Andrew kills his third, technically fourth if you count that kid from the flashback, person. He runs into the hitman while trying to find Ashley and pre-fires harder than a siege player, unloading the entire mag into the hitman. Fun fact, before heading to the park, there's a scene where you go to pick up Ashley's clothes from the washer while the hitman is inside the room. Stupid plot point, I know. And you can actually get an early bad ending by interacting with the closet to find him, killing the duo. You even get an achievement for doing so, but that doesn't actually happen, so we end up killing the guy instead. We update our criminal record by committing Grand Theft Auto of the corpse we just blasted into next week and taking his shitty car for a joyride. And by joyride, I mean to the only place we know is safe. The new home of the parents. But before we take off, The two have an argument about Ashley's Andy problem. Andrew calls her out for her repeated use of the name, pointing out that she's just trying to get him used to the name by sheer exposure. Meanwhile, Ashley gaslights him into thinking that it's just a prank, bro. The scene is really well done, and Ashley genuinely feels hurt that Andrew can't take a joke. And while Andrew tries to make a bridge for the two, telling her that he's just looking out for them, Ashley isn't having it and is ready to break down into tears before she drifts off into sleep, ignoring Andrew as he drives to their parents' home. While I did say the scene was well done, it does have its issues metacontextually. Like we just mentioned, Andrew is calling her out for her toxic behavior, which is incredibly healthy for him. Even the way he goes about trying to comfort Ashley at the end of the argument is pretty well done. He doesn't apologize for wanting her to stop calling him Andy, but instead talks about how hard he can be about the situation they're in. All this, in my opinion, is incredibly well done and tasteful. But you might have noticed what I left out. Ashley is an absolute nightmare in this scene. Not only does she gaslight her brother, but in a way herself too. Based on her reactions both here and later on in the chapter, it really does seem like she's depressed about the distance between her and her brother. And that's the reason she keeps calling him Andy. Because it wasn't Andrew that chose her, it was Andy. And now he's going away, transforming into this person that she hardly recognizes. Despite this, that doesn't make what she's doing okay, and in my personal opinion, playing as someone as objectively shitty as Ashley just kinda wears me down. I understand that's a personal taste thing and fits in with the product as a whole, but in case you couldn't tell, up to this point, I've had more investment with the older grave sibling, rather than the younger. The game continues with Ashley in some dream world with these red trees and petals. Turns out, the demon summoned us and wants to strike a deal. He wants us to give him souls, and in return, he'll recharge the dream talisman. Luckily for us, we're heading somewhere that has a soul or two to spare. But first we need to get out of here. Unlike the first chapter that had very middling puzzles, this one has some pretty interesting ones. Especially this room, where you actually have to get a flower from the previous room in order to get the extra present. Which leads to a sweet little backstory moment between Andy and Leyley, where he gives her a birthday surprise. It's really cute, and I hope the game shows more elements like this later, when the two act more like a happy pair rather than always being so spiteful. Although, if I'm being entirely honest, I don't know what lies beyond the other door. I forgot to record footage of doing it, and I've already played through the back end of this game 3 times, so unless going down that door creates a whole new route somehow, I'm fine with missing a bit of dialogue. Editor's note, I decided to boot up the game and try it out. It's just one very simple puzzle, and the demon telling us to get the fuck out of his realm route instead of going to our own realm, so nothing important. You don't even get to see that cute birthday scene. After waking up, honestly, not a lot happens. The two rack up yet another crime to their repertoire by adding B&E into the mix, breaking into their parents' house to get a quick buck. That is, until their mother comes home. Andrew's playing up the niceties, but it's very clear that all parties are very uncomfortable. The two decide to stay for dinner and the night, before the mother very strongly suggests that the two of them should stay separated. Both tonight, where they're sleeping in separate rooms, and forever, where she suggests that they find different friends to live with. The next big story event happens when we fall asleep again, this time as Andrew. The first thing we get to see is the cultist we ate, speaking to him as a bodiless head. He seems to be having a good time. Behold this time I witnessed not, but flesh doth I possess to present unto thee. All ghosts apparently are required to speak like this. Yes, even the recently passed ones. You read too much poetry. But we need that piece of him that we ate in the last chapter, so we go deeper into the dream and meet Leyley, who's ever the annoying brat. Getting deeper into this puzzle, we actually get introduced to Julia, Andrew's ex, and she's so fucking cute. The design given in her portrait and how she interacts with Andrew is wonderful, which makes Ashley's active sabotage of their relationship be that much worse. We get to see a flashback of Julia confronting Andrew's constant bailing for his sister, and she's so kind in how she approaches it. She's very aware of trying to be a kind partner, and Andrew's even very receptive to it. To the best of his ability, the two act like a very healthy couple, but even then, when the topic of Ashley is brought up, It's like this black splotch that corrupts their relationship. And it could be me, but this portrait right here, when he mentions how recent the breakup is and how he hasn't even been able to think about it, just looks really sad. After solving the puzzle and seeing Ashley creep in on Julia, we get to see the aftermath of what happens when you leave an asthmatic little girl in a dusty box overnight. Turns out, nothing good. The girl, who we find out is named Nina, is found dead when Andy and Leyley open the box the morning after, much to the horror of the former. Leyley doesn't really seem to care, even mocking her for being so weak as to die like she did. After a good while of panic, the two decide to bury Nina in a nearby park, trying to cover up their charge of third-degree murder. And it's here where, well, my least favorite scene in the game happens. Leyley holds the murder over Andy's head, threatening to reveal the secret if she doesn't get exactly what she wants. Him to be with her and no one else. This is so incredibly toxic and goes far beyond what I think the developers were trying to tell about Ashley. Up to this point, Ashley has been toxic and abusive, but it's always been framed as something that was a product of her upbringing. When she locked Nina in the box, it was framed as if the whole world was constantly against her, even her own family. And the scene in the gift box corroborates this. The flashback even mentions how their parents always saved money for Andy's birthday, but never Leyley's. But now that's thrown out the window and turns Leyley into this dark and devilish child that was just horrid from the start. There are multiple points throughout the story where Ashley either alludes to or directly states how uncaring her mother was, and in the present it can even be seen. So why? Why completely set up this complex character that the game has built up pretty well prior to this into this poisonous rat that blots out all the joy in her brother's life because she can? Why set up these moments where she's struggling to let go of the past and keeps clinging like it was the only happy memory, when that memory is immediately followed up by this horrid display of characterization? I don't have an answer, and honestly, the people at Kit 9 are gonna need to make some real Shakespearean writing to reinvest me in the character of Ashley Graves. But for now, fuck this scene, and fuck Leyley. No, not like that. We wake up to Ashley trying to immediately rescind my last statement of not fucking her, but the mom comes in and saves us. Ashley isn't too happy about getting cock-blocked by her mother, so she pulls out the blicky and leaves her downstairs. And it's here where I'm gonna put a spoiler warning. From here on out, we're going to be talking about the different ending routes of the game, so if you're still interested in playing this game, here's your cue to pause the video, play it out, then come back, because I could really use the watch time. You ready? Alright, let's go. After setting up the ritual and taking as much money from the family as possible, Andrew gets an offer from his mom to basically give up on Ashley and try to lead a normal life. You get the option to accept or decline, and for the ending I got originally, Andrew accepts. Or at least he was considering it before Ashley came back and we go through with the ritual anyway. Much like chapter 1, the ending of this chapter fumbles in its pacing, but all you really need to know is that the parents die and we spend the rest of the Waking World section cleaning up the remnants of their corpse. And yes, this includes cannibalism, but it's nowhere near as understandable as the cultists from last time. They just do it to cover their tracks. Into the dream world, however, things become very interesting. Now that the trinket is charged with the souls of our dead parents, we get to have another dream as Ashley. Although, this time, it isn't a vision, at least in the direct sense. We come to the dreaming world with something chasing after us. Not wanting to see what it is that's chasing us, we keep going forward until we reach a dead end. Turns out, it's Andrew. And he's not particularly happy. There, Truce. Come on, Andy, play nice with your sister. Tag. I'm it. You should run. The dream ends with him putting the cleaver to Ashley's throat and cutting it open, waking us up swiftly. And it's this ending where we really get to see how cold Andrew is to his sister now. He shouts and calls her a bitch when the heads roll down, and the final moments of the chapter allude to the idea that the two might end up possibly killing each other. Despite that, the most interesting thing in this chapter is the conversation right before Andrew slits Ashley's throat. He talks about how he's tired of her excuses, of her lies. She's proven time and time again that she doesn't care about Andrew as a person, but as a plaything. And so I find it fitting that her nightmare is about that power balance shifting. Now she's at his mercy, and Andrew's run fresh out. But what if we take a different route? What if, instead of accepting the mother's plea, we take Ashley's side? In this timeline, Andrew is a lot kinder to Ashley, and ironically, Ashley seems to be more thrown off by this. In the last ending, she still seemed to be reveling and messing with Andrew, but here she seems far more concerned that things are going as well as they are. Other than that though, we head into the dream all the same, except this time, it isn't anywhere near a nightmare. It's this simple little puzzle where we have to put dolls in certain places. We solve the puzzle and not much happens. We head to the bridge like the last ending to dispose of the proof of patricide and drive off into the third chapter. Except this time, before we drive off, Andrew notices a weird little mole in the palm of his hand. Unbeknownst to him, it grows into an eye that looks all too familiar. But, of course, that isn't it either. While these two show the different decay and burial endings, this ending has two versions. Back at the doll puzzle in the dream, there's one section with two murals, one containing Andrew and Ashley, and the other with Ashley at a distance while Andrew is next to Julia. The right answer to this puzzle is to put the sunshine in the first slot, broken heart in the second, and heart in the third. This shows the story of Andy and Leyley having fun as kids, but Ashley being heartbroken when Andrew gets with Julia. But of course, this is the sane path. Put the heart in the first slot, sunshine in the second, and heartbreak in the third. This gives us the most infamous scene in the game. The not sane path. The incest scene. I won't be touching on the scene itself, but I wouldn't be doing my job right if I didn't at least talk about the surrounding bits. It's incredibly uncomfortable to watch, and I hated going through with it. I see people online talking about how this is the best ending, and honestly, I don't see it. This scene as a whole just further exemplifies the toxic nature taken to a wild extreme. I really don't see the value in this scene, but at the same time, I don't agree with the public discourse revolving around this game as a whole. The Coffin of Andy and Leyley is a lot of things. It's got interesting characters, it's got a very interesting story that I want to see unfold. It's even got a villain protagonist in the form of Ashley. There's a lot to love about this game. And honestly, I'm excited to see where it goes moving forward. It's not perfect, and as I've said before, it's definitely not for everyone. But to those looking for an interesting story that's still being developed, I'd say the game's worth your attention. Just don't listen to the people trying to parade it around as only an incest game. Take that issue into consideration of the product as a whole, and trust me, I have. But don't come away with it being the only thing you remember. If you do remember one thing from this game, remember that Ashley sucks, stay in Julia, and I will see you later. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Honestly, I was a little scared to put this one out after the first one did really well for my channel. And I was worried that it wasn't gonna do as well. But, you know, I pushed through and I made this script to the best of my ability. So hopefully y'all like it. I didn't want to put the like, comment, subscribe thing in the middle like last time because the second chapter deals with a bunch of heavier topics and it felt a little weird. So yeah, if you like the stuff and you made it here to the end, please consider doing all those things like, comment, subscribing, ring the bell. It would mean a lot to me. I'm doing my best to try and make a video a week, and thanks. We'll see you in the next one.